Zur Haus one midsummer's eve, as I strolled down from Trevalga, and I bet would you believe a man with the golden tree. Zur Haus one midsummer's eve, as I strolled down from Trevalga, and I bet would you believe a man with the golden tree. Zur Haus one midsummer's eve, as I strolled down from Trevalga, and I bet would you believe a man with the golden tree.
You gone shy? That's unusual for you. We've got little Lucas, we've got Kyron and Evie so far. We should have 5 this morning. So we've got another 2 to come.
It's a cold and grey Thursday morning in the Cornish village of Trevalga. Childminder Kizzy Lockyer is taking delivery of her charges for the day.
You've gone shy. You ready? Have a look. You ready? Spin it. Whoa.
Trevalga sits on the cliff tops of the North Cornish coast. What makes it unique is that the houses are permanently occupied by tenants paying rent. Kizzy, did you always want to do this line of work?
Yes, I think so. I think the children literally just feel at ease. And some people, you know, how do you cope with so much noise? But I think maybe I'm a sibling of one of 7, and that was just a normal. It's just like normal home.
You were pretty much born and grew up here.
Yes.
And when you got to teenage, you got to that time of life where you're thinking, what am I going to do next? You know, did you expect to stay here?
Yeah, I kind of went off to do theatre school at the local college, and I suppose always thought, sorry. It's all right, darling. It's just quite an emotional time, really.
So even though your parents and yourself knew about the short-term tenancies, you felt it just would be forever. There was no sense.
Yes. No, absolutely. I mean, Justin moved in with me when I moved into Tregaina here, which was 3 years ago. And he said, but it's only a short hold tenancy. I said, yeah, but everyone's here forever. I literally, you know, we had a discussion about, should I be spending all this money on the business in this house? And I just assumed that it would be there as long as you paid the rent and as long as you kind of lived harmoniously with the rest of your community, you were here. Very good music.
You get big tractors along here. You can see the tractor marks on the side of the road that are actually the full width of the road.
Kiz's partner, Justin Ruscombe King, offered to take me out for a drive around the estate.
Unfortunately, this is also a rat run from Camelford to Tintagel. And there are various little rat runs, and this is one of them.
So we're going to stop here for a bit and have a look at Trevalga from here. Is this a good vantage point?
Well, there's a hedge there, so I thought if we stood on the hedge, we could look down over Trehane Farm, and you'd be able to see up and down the coast and put the whole thing in perspective. Brilliant. So if we hop out. Hope the dog's still slept. Do you stay there, dog, please?
Right. I'm going to give you the map.
And we'll see where we are.
See where we are.
We are exactly there, by Trehane Farm.
Yes.
Where Sarah and Philip James live, and their dairy farm. To the sort of northwest of us, we've got Trevalga, the church, the village hall, the bonfire field, and then beyond them there is the manor house where Nicola and Pete live.
So the estate of Trevalga hits the sea and actually goes beyond the sea to some of the rocks out at sea.
Yeah, and Short Island there, and Growler Rock, and Long Island there with Fire Beacon Point, and the Saddle Rocks. The estate really includes 2 valleys and 2 hills.
And either side, You have the villages of Boscastle and Tintagel.
Yeah. So it's not just a village they're trying to sell. It is about 1,200 acres, just over, with a very traditional way of life attached to it.
Earlier this year, the entire village of Trevalga was put up for sale by Marlborough College, the prestigious public school in a Wiltshire town, almost 200 miles east of Trevalga, and the former school of Gerald Cogenvan, one-time owner of the village.
The story begins in 1950s when Gerald Cogenvan died and left his estate, the Trevalga estate, in trust to be managed and looked after in a sympathetic way for the landscape, the farms and the houses. And any profits from the rent were to be paid to Marlborough College. If you roll on 50 years or so, South West Water wanted to build a sewage works on the Trevalga estate to take the sewage from Bassini and Boscastle. And in doing so, the estate was able to sell some land to facilitate this. And once they'd sold the land, they needed to understand what they were going to do with the money. And they took advice on this. And the advice said that, rather surprisingly, that the trust that had managed the estate for 50 odd years, nearly 60 years, actually wasn't valid. And that the trust had failed, and that in fact the beneficiary of the trust should be Marlborough College. At that stage, Marlborough College took control of the estate, appointed new managing agents, and decided very quickly to sell it.
And they put a price on the estate.
And they put a price on the estate of £10 million.
I used to be quite involved with the church in Boscastle. It's something I've grown away from as I've grown up. But my granddad is here, my grandmother and my cousin here in this churchyard. So later on in life, it came to mean a lot more to me, I suppose.
Gerald Cogenvan's final resting place is the graveyard of Trevalga's St Petrock's Church. Kiz's younger sister, Serena Patrick, is my guide.
All through the summer there were fresh flowers put out here, and I think people visited it quite a bit more regularly than they did before, really trying to feel a connection with the man who tried to protect Trevalga.
So the stone.
It's very simple. I mean, when he died, he had no close family.
So here, the inscription.
Yeah.
Gerald Cogenvan died 10th of January 1959, aged 82 years, Lord of the Manor of Trevalga.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as a youngster, I didn't know his name, but I would be told about this old man who owned Trevalga, and when he died, he set it up in a way that it could never be sold, it could never be broken up. This is what I understood from being literally from a tiny child. I remember asking my mum at some young age, about buying houses. How do people buy houses? You get houses, and she explained it, and she said, "But we can't. We could never buy this house." And at that point, she explained to me, no names, but that Trevalga is protected, and that's the word that has always been used. Trevalga is protected, and one of the reasons this has hit people so hard, a lot of outsiders, they can't understand it. You're in a rented property, it's going to change. Of course it's going to change. But when you've grown up, if you think he died in 1959, I'm only 26, right? All my life, I've believed that. Lots of people in the village, obviously, are under 50, and all their lives they have believed that. It's not just that you were in a rented property. They understood about the trust, and they believed in the trust.
And the trust? When you were growing up, did you use the word the trust?
Not so much. It was just that you say Trevalga was put into trust so it can never be split up or broken up, but you wouldn't have much occasion to talk about it. There was no real reason to talk about the trust. I didn't read the will until just this year. I've never had occasion to. I suppose it's almost like the trust is deity. It's there and you believe in it, and you're not asking for physical proof of its existence.
I'm not leaving. I was told I'd stay here forever. I will stay here forever. So I don't feel that I'm going to leave.
Sitting on a headland high above the Atlantic Ocean is the Manor House, home to Peter Prezovnich and his wife Nicola.
I feel quite comfortable, even now. I have no fear.
How was it for you when you first arrived?
No, I just saw everybody is still living in the 19th century bliss. It's like Hobbiton. Everybody wants to live somewhere where they want to be safe and they feel safe. And I felt safe I couldn't really afford the rent at the time, but I knew it will come because I put it to the universe that I feel safe, so it'll come. So have faith.
Sitting here in the room with you and looking out your windows, just the views.
Oh, it's fantastic, isn't it? I've painted that view so many times now. I did that rock out there, and I did a little baby dragon sat on the rock, and I'm calling its mother home, and that's that view out there.
This is a painting called The Dragon Cove. This is the loosely based one on the view out of the window from the manor, with the two slants of cliffs there and the lighthouse that comes down there. Peter ended up doing 2 or 3 different versions of this because of how different it can appear at different times.
And in Peter's painting here, the dragon is hovering. It looks like it's looking at something. I don't know what it's actually doing. What do you think it's...
Well, he's looking east.
Yeah.
For the sun. And then his hand ready west for the water.
In their Tintagel gallery, Nicola Przovnich recalled her first impressions of life at the manor house.
It was one of the first mornings when I walked out onto the cliffs towards Lady's Window, and I went and stood there and just saw the mists rising and what they call the dragon's breath making its way up the fields, which is the mist in the morning that looks incredible. And I went out the next day and it was so different, and I thought this will be different every day because of the energy from the ocean is right there with you and right there for all the people that are in Trevalga. And some of them, like I say, I've only been around in this area for a couple of years, but some of them have got a lot more history than that. And I know what that feels like when that people know the smell of the sea coming off the cliffs first thing in the morning, and they've smelt that for however long, and their mother and their grandmother and whatever, you know, however they're connected, but the people with the deep connections, I've got a lot of respect for them because there's a sense of belonging, but nothing to do with ownership. It's just belonging. And you always feel that you belong somewhere, that you're happy.
Round and round, the wheels on the bus go round and round all day long.
Should we do some singing? Should we get some musical instruments out? Shall we? Should we get the drum?
How did people become aware that properties were available for rent in Trevalga?
Word of mouth. I think I went on 3 interviews. I had to do like a 5-year business plan to show the sustainability, because obviously I was a single parent and quite a young single parent. I was in social, council housing in Boscastle. So it's quite a big jump to move out to the village, live on your own in a house. For instance, when the rent for this place came up, he asked me what I could manage to pay. I kind of put a figure that I thought was reasonable for what we were taking on.
Would you be happy to tell me what that figure is?
Yes. Yeah. My original figure, I said between 600 and 700. So we agreed at 650.
650 a
Calendar month.
for the whole farmhouse.
Whole farmhouse and the acre garden. Yes. I think what he wanted to check, he wanted to give priority to someone that had been in the village, but he also didn't want me to take on something perhaps that I couldn't manage.
So it sounds like everybody who lives in Trevalga in a way is handpicked for what they can contribute to Trevalgan life.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I think his main criteria is that basically that you can pay the rent, that you live harmoniously with your neighbours, and you maintain the house you live in.
And you said that, at one point you wanted to be on the stage.
Yes.
Which I presume would have meant a life very far away from Trevalga.
Yes, but probably always coming back. It's always home when you come back.
The trust started when Gerald Kirkembin died. He left the will, which in effect said that he would like Trevalga to remain as much as it always was, as was possible in the future. And to use his words, he hoped that the balance of the rent beyond maintaining the area would bring, and the words actually were, I think, some small income to Marlborough College.
For over 20 years, the human face of the Trevalga Trust was Chartered Surveyor and Trustee John Wakeham.
The people who live in the houses are people of the area, pretty much, and they live and work in the area and always have done. And I suppose the modern word you've got to look at is sustainability, and the Trust has tried to manage the properties on full rents, but in a sustainable way. We're looking at a village that hasn't been mucked about by modern development. We've got no bungalows in the village. We've never had to advertise for tenants. There's always been people looking to come and live in Trevalga. Usually it's been pot luck. If you happen to be asking when something comes available, which is infrequent, then yes, I mean, the rent will be so much, do you want it? It's nice if you have somebody who's of the area, yes, and if you feel they fit in, I suppose, but yeah, this smacks of social engineering, and we certainly haven't been there.
How much milk you're looking at in there?
That's 10,000 litres in there. But we haven't filled that yet.
No.
No. It's a bit of a tough farm, really, but it's all open to the elements. But we built this, it's not part of the estate.
Sarah and Philip James are tenants at Trahane Dairy Farm.
And we started off with about 50 cows, and now we've gone up to 200 cows. Our cows are good cows. I think they are sensitive. You know, if you go in calm into that pit there, you have a calm milking. If you go in stressed, you know, they'll feel it.
Was Trafalgar the right place to have a long-term plan?
Yes, because we knew that once we were here, we'd be here forever, we'd hoped. That's what we were led to believe.
So you and Phil put a lot of investment into the farm to create this dairy farm?
Yeah, we've put a lot in because...
The milking area?
Yeah, we've borrowed a chunk of money to do it, and it'll be paid off if we're allowed to continue as we are going.
The problem is, most things in life boil down to pounds, shillings and pence, and sadly an administrator of this estate has to come to terms with how he maintains the estate. Sadly for the tenants of Trevalga, they are going to be exposed to rather regular increases in rent. You know, there's no great pot of gold somewhere that they can just keep dipping into. I don't think you can completely wrap it up in bubble wrap and say nothing's going to change in Trevalga. I'm afraid that is not going to be the case, whether it's a rented estate or not, you know. Yeah.
But the landscape, just looking out your window as you begin
that has
your day.
kept me going personally. The fact there's the sea and the sky and the land and the colours, green and blue, just keeps me going. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I don't feel comfortable anywhere else.
Would you like to go into the chair?
Sure.
Yeah. I came down to Harvest Festival with my mum, she does a lot of gardening, really just to say thank you to whatever might be there. Trevalga, for me, it feels like no other place. I go away and life is turmoil. You come back and you visit the valleys and the rivers and the place where you built a dam, where your nephew is now, and there's no shop, there's no gift shop, there's no tea room.
Of course, there are no second homes here.
Absolutely none, no. It just wouldn't be viable because nothing's ever been able to be sold, and it wouldn't have been accepted. You know, the trustees wouldn't have rented a property to somebody who's only going to be in that property for 2 months out of the year.
We are down in my top fishing pond, which is where I keep the fish that I'm just about to market to go to fishing lakes all around the countryside. And we're just going to feed them now in the hope they'll be hungry. Not brilliantly hungry, but they are. You can tell when they're not hungry at all because they don't bounce around on the surface. The only other thing we've got to check while we're here is there's water going in, which there is, and there's water going out, which there is, and the predator fencing is all up, and there are no trees falling in, and everything looks as though it ought to.
How did you meet Kizzy?
Both our children went to the local primary school, so the old school gate romance ploy.
Kizzy lives down in the village with Justin and my nephew Kai. They've got a house right opposite over the valley from the house that we all grew up in. She's a very loving girl. So she used to do things like if she didn't want something anymore, she would leave it on my bed for me to have as like a present. But also she's a bit older, so when I got to sort of around 11, 12 kind of age, she was off and out and about, and I didn't see her as much. And we're very different people as well. She's a very active person. She did a lot of training, did karate competitions, and we'd go for runs at 5 a.m. and things like that. And I'm much more academic. I like to read. I'd go walking around the valleys and things, but much more I'd go walking with a book and sit somewhere and read it, rather than be the one sort of climbing up trees. And I used to, given a chance, steal this big box of nail varnish that she had. It was a Kelly's ice cream tub. It was filled with a big collection of all different colours, and me and my friend would take them, we would steal them and paint little statues or pictures, whatever we felt needed painting. We'd get a coat of nail varnish because it was so pretty and shiny. She was unhappy. Yeah, she was.
I roamed and played in rivers and stuff with just children, with no grown-ups around by kind of, I suppose, 7 years old. But as my child wanted to go off, you're more, I used to say things like, well, you've got to be careful because it's summertime, because there is more visitors. That wouldn't have been possibly a comment that was ever said to me. So, things do change in communities, but as to the kind of upheaval that we've had in the last kind of year, I couldn't believe it. I think there was a lot of disbelief. And I just thought, it might just be a change of paperwork, or, it wouldn't actually affect us. And I think a lot of us were under that illusion that nothing would change.
The residents of Trevalga took their own legal advice, which contradicted that given to Marlborough College, and argued that the trust was indeed valid. So now we have a stalemate.
The manor has been sold through history, but it's not been split up and sold off piecemeal. And that is really what they plan to do, because that will get the most money. And at the moment, I have no feeling about which way it could go. I just don't know. For it to happen in the first place has shaken my whole foundations, and to allow myself to hope that it will go back, that it will continue as it should, makes me scared for if it didn't, because the pain of losing it twice would be too much. So at the moment I just kind of hope that it will, but I don't know.
During the making of this programme, we invited Marlborough College to take part, but they declined to be interviewed. Their spokesperson did provide us with this statement. Marlborough wishes to have this matter resolved as quickly as reasonably possible, because it is very aware of the uncertainty hanging over the residents of Trevalga. If it is confirmed that the college holds absolute title to the estate, then it will proceed with the sale. The college is aware of the concerns of the residents, and for that reason has made clear its strong preference to sell the estate, if at all possible, to a single buyer who wants the estate as a long-term investment.
He reckons with the smoke and that, we can stinking, and time the wind takes it, they can be over there.
Yeah.
So if he's there.
Steve Wickett, the church sexton, landscape gardener and occasional gravedigger for the village, and Justin have landed the job of staging the firework display as Trevalgans gather for a show of solidarity.
Right. How are you going to launch these?
We were thinking of maybe putting them in the lathe.
Should we open the packet and see if one will fit in properly? Because that looks like a launching tube to me.
Yeah.
So what do you know about Marlborough College?
Ironically enough, my father actually went to school there. I didn't. I was considered too stupid to go to Marlborough College, so I went to another school.
What a coincidence.
Oh, yes, I know.
Your father at Marlborough and Trevalga versus Marlborough.
Yeah. It is funny that, isn't it? Yeah. I live at Trevalga and my father went to Marlborough. It is all the knots have come back together in a sort of strange, bizarre circle. Maybe it's a Gaudian knot or something.
Yeah, that's perfect there.
Okay.
Just boom.
Right, so all the smaller ones can go on the sand.
the college had moved into possession. The people of the area, who like Trevalga the way it always was, did question the ability of the college to do that. It was done on the basis of legal advice. As always, you can find a lawyer with a different opinion, and that will get resolved, but I doubt it'll be done in 5 minutes. I would be very disappointed if Trevalga ended up dispersed and become the holiday home of the southeast wealthy. It would be a shame, because it would totally change the character of the place, and it would make it like everywhere else. Go to Port Isaac. The fishermen's houses down by the harbour are occupied by the holiday makers, and the fishermen live in the council houses up at the top of the hill. And that's not right. It's not the way it should be.
Hello, Bill. Hi. Hi, Mitch. You all right?
This is our guy. He's going on the fire.
Oh, no.
He's going on the fire anyway. You're going on the fire.
You're Miss Forks.
I'm Miss Forks, am I?
Yeah. You're going on the fire.
There's only 85 residents in Trevalga, so there's been a good turnout today from the village. But what this really is, I suppose, is a letting off of steam. You know, getting together in a happier light, and just feeling the relief. I mean, there was a real raise of spirits when the sale was suspended, and yeah, things aren't finalised yet, but they do look a lot more positive. And I don't know, you just need a bit of fun, don't you?
And a big bonfire.
Yes, you do need a beacon.
So for me, it's nice to sort of get a sense of the village at night as well. Just a little sense.
So
of it.
quiet, isn't it? I mean, I wish I could take you out. My mum's is right at the top, last house on the road, and you walk out of her front door, and on a clear night you can see the whole Milky Way, and it's incredible. It's beautiful, and there's not a sound generally. In the valleys below you, and it's still. I mean, it's amazing on a stormy night as well, because then the wind's whipping up the valley from the sea, and just such an energy to the place. And I love to walk. I don't take a torch. If I go out at night in Trevalga, I don't take a torch, because I know the place well enough to know where I'm going. I've, touch wood. I've never fallen or anything, but I like to be out in the dark on my own here, sometimes with my dogs, because it is such an amazing place to be when you're at night on your own. Because there's not the farms working, it becomes such a quiet place. People exhaust themselves during the day here. Everybody works so hard that at night it's really settled. It's really quiet and it's really calm, and it gives you the side, I suppose, the side of the land more, and the feel of the eternity of Trevalga, the eternity of what it's built on. Even if it did go ahead, it got sold, if the worst happened, the valley would still be there. The beauty of the place would still be there. The rivers would still run through, and I suppose that's what I get when I'm out at night on my own in Trevalga is the eternity of it.